Imagine standing in front of hundreds of people, wearing the dress you dreamed about since childhood, your heart pounding with anticipation, only to hear the man you trusted say the words that would shatter everything. Imagine the silence that follows, thick and suffocating, as every eye in the room turns to you, not with sympathy, but with pity, curiosity, perhaps even satisfaction. Imagine the Mediterranean sun bleeding into the horizon, casting long shadows across ancient stone walls, while your entire world collapses in the most public way possible. Now imagine the doors bursting open, and a man walking in who changes everything, not with promises of love, but with a single terrifying declaration of ownership. This is not a fairy tale. This is Giulia's story. The Villa dei Fiori sat perched on the cliffs of Sicily like a crown jewel, its weathered stone walls bearing witness to centuries of secrets, betrayals, and blood. The vineyards surrounding the estate stretched toward the sea in perfect rows, their leaves rustling in the warm evening breeze that carried the scent of salt water and wild rosemary. This was where Giulia Romano had imagined beginning her new life, a life that, in the span of 5 minutes, had become her worst nightmare. She stood at the altar, her ivory gown cascading around her like sea foam, hand embroidered with delicate lace that had taken artisans months to complete. Her dark hair was swept up in an elegant chignon, tiny orange blossoms woven through the strands. She looked like a Renaissance painting come to life, beautiful and tragic in equal measure. But beauty meant nothing now. Marco Santini, her fiancé of 3 years, stood before her, his face pale but resolute. The priest had just asked the sacred question, and instead of the words she'd longed to hear, Marco had stepped back, creating a physical distance that felt like an ocean between them. "I cannot do this," Marco said, his voice carrying across the silent hall. 300 guests held their collective breath. "I cannot marry you, Giulia. I'm sorry. I thought I could, but I can't live this lie anymore." Giulia's hands trembled, clutching the bouquet of white roses and olive branches so tightly that thorns pierced her palm. She barely felt the pain. "Marco, what are you saying? Please, we can talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about." His eyes, once warm, now looked at her with something resembling pity. "I've been seeing someone else. Francesca. We're in love, and I should have told you months ago, but I was a coward. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but I cannot marry you." The gasps erupted like a wave. Giulia heard her mother's strangled cry from the front row, saw her father rise from his seat, his face purple with rage. But what hurt most was the sound that followed, the whispers, the barely concealed laughter from some of Marco's friends, the excited murmuring as people leaned toward each other, already composing the story they would tell at dinner parties for years to come. Francesca. The name hit Giulia like a physical blow. She knew exactly who Marco meant. Francesca Ricci, her cousin, who had been staying with them for the past 6 months while attending university in Palermo. The same cousin who had helped Giulia choose this dress, who had toasted her at the rehearsal dinner just last night, who had looked her in the eye and wished her every happiness. "You and Francesca?" Giulia's voice came out barely above a whisper, but in the absolute silence of the hall everyone heard. "My cousin Francesca?" Marco had the decency to look ashamed for a moment before he straightened his shoulders. "It just happened. We didn't plan it. But I have to be honest. With you, with everyone. I can't start a marriage based on a lie." "How noble of you," Giulia said, and something in her tone made several people shift uncomfortably. "How incredibly noble to wait until we're standing at the altar, in front of everyone we know, to decide that honesty matters to you." "Giulia, please! Get out!" Her voice was steady now, cold as the marble beneath their feet. "Get out of my sight, Marco. Go find my dear cousin and tell her she's won whatever game she thought she was playing." Marco hesitated, perhaps expecting tears, pleading, collapse. But Giulia stood tall, her chin raised, even as she felt herself dying inside. After a moment that stretched into eternity, Marco turned and walked down the aisle, his footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. The crowd parted before him like the Red Sea, some faces shocked, others openly intrigued by the scandal unfolding before them. Giulia remained at the altar, alone, the priest beside her looking helpless and ancient, as if this situation was beyond anything his decades of service had prepared him for. She could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes on her, could hear the whispers growing louder now that Marco had left. Someone's phone camera flashed. Her humiliation was being documented, shared, turned into entertainment. Her father reached the altar first, his face twisted with fury and grief. "Giulia, Let's go. Let's get you out of here. No. She surprised herself with the firmness of that single word. No, Papa. I'm not running away. I'm not giving them that satisfaction. Sweetheart, please. Her mother had joined them now, tears streaming down her carefully made-up face. I said no. Giulia looked out at the crowd, at faces she'd known her entire life. The Benedettis, who owned the olive oil company. The Russos, whose son had been her childhood friend. The Carlucci family, prominent in local politics. All of them watching her fall apart, mentally recording every detail to share later. That's when she heard it. The low rumble of car engines approaching, growing louder. Multiple vehicles, moving fast. The sound was out of place in this pastoral setting, aggressive and modern against the backdrop of centuries-old stone and tradition. The massive wooden doors at the back of the hall burst open with a crash that made everyone jump. The whispers died instantly, replaced by something more primal. Fear. 3 men entered first, dressed in dark suits that did nothing to hide the danger they represented. They moved with the confidence of predators, scanning the room with cold efficiency. Behind them came a figure that commanded attention without saying a word. Dante Valentino was not a tall man, but his presence filled the space as if he were a giant. Perhaps it was the perfectly tailored black suit that moved like shadow across his frame, or the gold chain at his throat that caught the dying light from the windows. Or perhaps it was simply the weight of his reputation that preceded him like a physical force. His face was all sharp angles and hard lines, a scar running from his left eyebrow to his cheekbone, a souvenir from a knife fight in his youth, according to the stories. His eyes, dark as espresso and twice as intense, swept across the frozen crowd before landing on Giulia. Everyone in Sicily knew who Dante Valentino was. The Valentino family had controlled the Western territories for 3 generations, their influence reaching into every business, every political office, every aspect of life in the region. They were the shadow government, the ones who decided fates with a word or a gesture. Good people crossed themselves when the Valentino name was mentioned and hurried their children inside. What is this? Giulia's father demanded, though his voice lacked its earlier authority. Even he understood the danger of challenging the Valentino family. Dante didn't acknowledge him. His eyes remained fixed on Giulia as he walked down the aisle, his footsteps deliberate and unhurried. The crowd pressed back against the walls, creating a clear path. No one dared speak. Even the priest had gone pale, clutching his Bible like a shield. Giulia watched him approach, her mind strangely calm despite the surreal nature of the moment. She'd seen Dante Valentino once before, years ago, at a funeral for a local businessman. He'd stood at the back of the church, never sitting, never praying, just observing with those dark, unreadable eyes. She'd been 17 then, and something about his gaze had made her shiver. He stopped at the altar, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle, cedar and leather. Up close, she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, the slight gray at his temples that added distinction rather than age. He couldn't have been more than 35, but he carried himself like someone who had lived several lifetimes. Dante Valentino, he said, as if she might not know who he was. His voice was deep, textured like good whiskey, with the slight rasp of a heavy smoker. We haven't been properly introduced, though I've known who you are for some time now, Giulia Romano. The use of her name, spoken with such intimacy, sent a chill down her spine. Why are you here? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I heard you were getting married. I came to stop it. The murmurs erupted again, louder now, edged with panic. Giulia's father stepped forward. Now you listen here, Valentino. Dante held up one hand, not even looking at her father, and the older man fell silent as if struck. The power in that simple gesture was absolute. You were about to make a terrible mistake, Giulia, Dante continued, his eyes never leaving hers. Marrying that fool, that child who doesn't understand what he had, who walked away from you like you were nothing, in front of all these people, these vultures who came here hoping for entertainment rather than to celebrate a union. I didn't ask for your opinion on my choices, Giulia said, finding her voice despite the surreal nature of the conversation. No, you didn't, but I'm giving it anyway. He reached out, and before she could react, he took her hand. His grip was firm, warm, and somehow both threatening and protective at once. I've waited a long time for this moment, Giulia. Longer than you know, and I'm not waiting anymore. What are you talking about? He turned to face the crowd, still holding her hand, his thumb brushing across her knuckles in a gesture that felt shockingly intimate given the circumstances. When he spoke, his voice carried to every corner of the hall, clear and undeniable as a judge's sentence. 3 years ago, Julia Romano's father came to me with a problem. His business was failing, debts mounting, creditors circling like sharks. He asked for my help, and I gave it. I cleared his debts, invested in his company, made sure his family name remained respectable in this community. Dante paused, letting the words sink in. Julia felt her stomach drop. In exchange, I asked for one thing. Her. The world tilted. Julia turned to her father, whose face had gone ashen, then to her mother, who couldn't meet her eyes. Papa? Tell me this isn't true. Her father's silence was answer enough. I gave you 3 years, Dante continued, his voice matter-of-fact, as if discussing a business transaction rather than her life. 3 years to prepare her, to tell her the truth, to end things with the Santini boy properly. But you didn't, did you, Gianfranco? You let her get engaged, let her plan this wedding, let her walk into this humiliation, all because you were too much of a coward to tell her the truth. You bastard, Julia whispered, but she wasn't sure if she meant Dante or her father. Your father made a deal, Dante said, finally looking at her again. And in my world, deals are sacred. They must be honored. I've been patient, Julia. Generous, even. I let you have these years to yourself, to be young and naive and believe in fairy tales. But today, watching that fool reject you, humiliate you, I decided I'd waited long enough. He lifted her hand, and for one horrifying moment, Julia thought he might kiss it. Instead, he turned back to the crowd, his voice dropping to something darker, more dangerous. Let me make something very clear to everyone here. Julia Romano belongs to me, not as property, not as a possession, but as mine to protect, mine to provide for, mine to... He paused, choosing his words carefully. Care for, in the ways that matter. Any man who looks at her with disrespect, any woman who speaks ill of her, any person who dares to laugh at what happened here today will answer to me personally. Is that understood? The silence that followed was absolute. 300 people who had come to witness a wedding, then a humiliation, now witnessed something far more dangerous, a claim being staked by the most powerful man in Sicily. Julia tried to pull her hand away, but Dante's grip was iron. You can't just... This is insane. You can't walk in here and declare that I belong to you like I'm some kind of prize. I'm not declaring it, Dante said softly, for her ears only. I'm simply making public what was already agreed upon. Your father sold you to save his pride and his business. I'm not the villain here, Julia. I'm the only honest person in this room. Let go of me. Her voice shook with rage, with humiliation piled upon humiliation, with the sudden understanding that her entire life had been a lie. No, the word was gentle but absolute. Not until you understand something. You can hate me, you can fight me, you can curse my name, but I will never humiliate you the way that boy did. I will never make you look weak or foolish. I will never betray you publicly or privately. What I will do is take you away from here, from these people who came to watch you suffer, and I will give you time to process what you've learned today. I don't want anything from you. Perhaps not, but you need something. You need to leave this place with your dignity intact. Let me give you that much. He finally released her hand, but only to remove his suit jacket, which he draped over her shoulders. The gesture was oddly protective, the jacket still warm from his body, smelling of that cedar and leather cologne. Walk out of here with me, Julia. Show them that you are not broken by what happened today. Show them that you are more than what that fool made you appear to be. She wanted to refuse, wanted to spit in his face and tell him to go to hell. But as she looked out at the crowd, at the faces filled with pity, scandal, and barely concealed excitement, she realized he was right about one thing. She needed to leave, and she needed to leave in a way that gave her some semblance of power in this powerless situation. If I walk out with you, she said slowly, it changes nothing. I'm not agreeing to whatever deal my father made. I'm not agreeing to anything except getting out of here. Dante's smile was slight, but genuine. Fair enough, for now. He offered his arm, a strangely courtly gesture from a man whose reputation was built on violence and intimidation. After a moment's hesitation, Julia placed her hand on his arm, feeling the solid muscle beneath the expensive fabric. Together they turned and began walking down the aisle. The crowd parted before them like water, people pressing against the walls, some crossing themselves, others simply staring in shocked silence. Julia kept her chin high, her expression neutral, Even as her heart hammered against her ribs, Dante's men fell in behind them, a protective escort that made it clear no one was to follow. As they passed, Julia saw her mother crying, her father looking older than she'd ever seen him, and, standing near the back, her cousin Francesca, looking pale and frightened. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and Julia saw guilt there, fear, but also something else. Relief perhaps that Julia's attention was now elsewhere, that she was being taken away by someone far more dangerous than a scorned bride. They emerged into the golden evening light, the sun now touching the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber, rose, and deepening purple. The Mediterranean stretched before them, vast and indifferent to human drama. 3 black cars idled in the circular drive, engines purring like great cats. "I'm not getting in that car," Julia said, stopping at the top of the stone steps. "Then we'll stand here until you're ready," Dante replied calmly. "But eventually, you'll realize that going with me is better than going back in there." He was right, damn him. She couldn't go back inside, couldn't face those people again tonight. Her parents' house was 20 kilometers away, and she couldn't call anyone for a ride. Her phone was with her maid of honor inside, and even if she had it, who would she call? Everyone she knew had just witnessed her humiliation. "Where would you take me?" she asked. "My home, for tonight at least. You'll have your own room, your own space. In the morning, we'll talk about the arrangement your father made, and you can decide how you want to proceed. You're giving me a choice? I'm giving you information and time to process it," Dante said. "What you do with that is up to you." "But Julia," he turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "Understand this. Your father owes me, and that debt will be paid, one way or another. I'd prefer to resolve it in a way that honors both of us. But if you refuse, if you run, the consequences will fall on your family. Not violence," he added, seeing her expression, "but your father's business will collapse, your family's reputation will be destroyed, and your younger sister, Elena, isn't it, will find it very difficult to make the advantageous marriage your parents are hoping for. That's blackmail. That's business." He said it without apology, without shame. "In my world, debts must be paid. Your father understood that when he came to me. Now you understand it too." The sun slipped below the horizon, and the first stars appeared in the deepening blue above. From inside the villa, Julia could hear raised voices. Her father, probably, arguing with other family members about what had just happened. Soon they would come looking for her, demanding explanations, making everything worse. She looked at Dante Valentino, this stranger who claimed to own her through some devil's bargain made in desperation. His face was unreadable in the fading light, but something in his eyes was not unkind. Not soft, never soft, but not cruel either. "One night," she said finally, "I'll come to your house, listen to what you have to say, and then I'll make my decision. But I'm not promising anything beyond that." "One night," Dante agreed. He gestured to the lead car, and one of his men opened the rear door. "After you." Julia descended the steps, still wearing her wedding dress, Dante's jacket over her shoulders like a claim, like a brand. She slid into the leather interior of the car, the dress pooling around her in waves of ivory silk. Dante settled beside her, careful to leave space between them, respecting some invisible boundary. As the car pulled away, Julia looked back at the Villa dei Fiori, at the guests now spilling out onto the steps, pointing and talking animatedly. Her wedding that never was, her humiliation made complete, and now her kidnapping, though could it be called kidnapping when she'd agreed to go? They drove in silence through the Sicilian countryside, past ancient olive groves and stone farmhouses that had stood for centuries. The world outside seemed timeless, unchanging, even as Julia's life had been completely upended in the span of an hour. "Why?" she finally asked, breaking the silence. "Why would you want me? You could have any woman in Sicily. Why make a deal for someone you'd never even met?" Dante was quiet for a long moment, his face illuminated intermittently by passing headlights. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful, almost gentle. "I saw you once, 4 years ago. You were volunteering at the children's hospital in Palermo, reading to a little girl who was dying of cancer. You didn't know anyone was watching, and you didn't care. You read to that child for hours, and when she finally fell asleep, you cried. I watched you cry for a stranger's child, and I thought, that woman understands what it means to care for something beyond yourself. That woman has something real inside her, something true." Julia stared at him, shocked. "You made a deal for my life based on seeing me read to a sick child? I made a deal for your hand based on seeing the kind of person you are. Beautiful, Yes, I'm not blind. But Sicily has many beautiful women. What it lacks is women of genuine character, women who haven't been corrupted by money or status, or the endless game of appearances we all play. He turned to look at her directly. Your father came to me a year later, desperate and broken. I saw an opportunity to have something I wanted while helping someone in need. Some might call it calculated. I call it efficient. It's medieval. Perhaps. But so is much of how we live here, isn't it? The old families, the old ways, the debts and obligations that bind us together. I didn't create this system, Julia. I just learned to navigate it better than most. The car turned up a long, tree-lined drive, and ahead, Julia could see lights blazing from a massive stone structure that looked more like a fortress than a home. The Valentino estate was legendary, built by Dante's grandfather with money from ventures no one discussed in polite company, expanded by his father, and now maintained by Dante with the same ruthless efficiency he applied to everything else. They passed through iron gates that closed behind them with a resounding clang, and Julia felt a moment of panic. What had she agreed to? What had she walked into? As if sensing her fear, Dante spoke quietly. You're not a prisoner, Julia. Those gates keep threats out, not you in. If you want to leave tomorrow, I'll have my driver take you anywhere you wish to go. But I hope you'll stay long enough to hear me out, to understand the full situation before you make your decision. The car stopped before the main entrance, where a woman in her 60s waited, her gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, her face lined but dignified. She opened the car door before any of the men could, offering her hand to Julia. Signora Romano, welcome. I'm Maria, the housekeeper here. Let's get you out of that dress and into something comfortable, shall we? The kindness in her voice, the maternal concern, nearly undid Julia completely. She'd been holding herself together through sheer force of will, but this small gesture of care threatened to break through her defenses. She took Maria's hand and stepped out of the car, the wedding dress catching on the doorframe before Maria gently freed it. Thank you, Julia whispered. Come with me, dear. I've prepared a room for you, and I'll bring you some food. You must be exhausted. Julia glanced back at Dante, who nodded once, a gesture of permission or perhaps dismissal. Then she allowed Maria to lead her inside, into the cool, shadowed interior of the Valentino home. The room Maria brought her to was beautiful, spacious and elegant, with high ceilings, antique furniture, and French doors that opened onto a balcony overlooking the sea. Someone had already brought in her suitcase, the one she'd packed for her honeymoon that would never happen. How did you— Signor Valentino had one of his men collect your things from the villa, Maria explained, helping Julia out of the elaborate dress with practiced efficiency. He thought you might not want to return there tonight. He was right about that much, Julia admitted, stepping out of the dress and the mountains of tulle and silk. In just her undergarments, she felt exposed, vulnerable. Maria handed her a soft robe, silk and far too expensive to be just a casual gesture. I'll hang the dress, Maria said. Despite everything, it's too beautiful to crumple. You never know. You might want it someday. For your daughter, perhaps. The casual mention of a future daughter made Julia's chest tight. Hours ago, she'd been imagining children with Marco, a family, a normal life. Now she was in the house of a mafia boss, discussing a debt she hadn't known existed, her future more uncertain than ever. After Maria left, Julia stood on the balcony, the warm night air caressing her skin. She could hear the waves below, the eternal sound of the sea against rocks. The moon had risen, full and bright, turning the water to liquid silver. She should have been devastated. She should have been crying, breaking down, falling apart. Instead, she felt strangely numb, as if her mind had decided that today's events were too much to process and had simply shut down the emotional response until later. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Yes? It's Dante. May I come in? She wanted to say no, to lock the door and pretend none of this was happening, but that was cowardice, and if nothing else, today had taught her that running from reality only made things worse. Come in. He entered carrying a tray, wine, bread, cheese, olives, and fruit. Simple food, but beautifully arranged. He set it on a small table by the window and poured 2 glasses of dark red wine. You should eat something, he said. I suspect you had no appetite earlier. He was right. The elaborate wedding breakfast seemed like it had happened in another lifetime. Julia accepted the wine and sipped it, feeling the warmth spread through her chest. Tell me about this deal, she said. All of it. No more surprises. Dante settled into a chair, leaving the balcony to her. 3 years ago, your father's olive oil company was failing. Bad investments, poor management, debts he couldn't repay. His creditors were preparing to take everything. The company, the house, your family's good name. He came to me, desperate, and asked for help. And you saw an opportunity. I saw someone in need, and yes, I saw something I wanted. I'd been watching you, Julia. Not in a sinister way, he added, seeing her expression. But I'd noticed you around Palermo, seen the work you did with children's charities, heard people speak of you with genuine affection rather than fear or obligation. I thought, here is someone different, someone real. So you bought me. I offered your father a deal. I would clear his debts, invest in his company, ensure your family's financial security and social standing. In exchange, when you turned 25, you would marry me. He agreed. 25, I'm 24. You turned 25 in 2 months. Your father was supposed to have told you by now, was supposed to have prepared you, ended things with Marco properly. Obviously, he didn't. He let you get engaged, let you plan a wedding, let you— Dante's jaw tightened. Let you be humiliated in front of everyone you know rather than face the conversation he should have had years ago. Why didn't you just tell me yourself? Because I wanted you to come to me willingly, not under duress. I wanted your father to be honest with you, to give you time to adjust to the idea, to see that this arrangement could be beneficial for everyone involved. I underestimated his cowardice. Julia drank more wine, her mind racing. What happens if I refuse? If I tell you to take your deal and go to hell? Then your father's debts become due immediately. The interest alone over 3 years has been substantial. I've waived it while waiting for our arrangement to be fulfilled, but if you refuse, it all comes due. His company will collapse within weeks. Your family will lose everything. Your sister will grow up in poverty and shame rather than comfort and opportunity. So I have no choice. You have a choice, Julia. It's just not a good one. He leaned forward, his expression serious. But understand, I'm not a monster. I'm not going to force you into my bed. I'm not going to lock you in this house. I'm not going to treat you like property. What I'm offering is a partnership, a marriage of convenience that could become more, given time. A partnership. She laughed bitterly. Like a business arrangement? Many good marriages start as business arrangements. My grandparents, for instance, theirs was an arranged marriage, and they were devoted to each other for 53 years. Love can grow, Julia, if both people are willing to nurture it. And if it doesn't grow, if I can never love you? Something flickered across his face. Disappointment, perhaps, or resignation. Then we'll have a civil partnership based on mutual respect and shared goals. I'll provide for you, protect you, give you freedom to pursue your interests. In exchange, you'll be my wife in name and public appearance. What happens in private, between us, will be determined by what we both want and consent to. That's very progressive for a mafia boss. I'm a man of contradictions. He smiled slightly. I can be ruthless in business, gentle in private. I can order things that would horrify most people, then turn around and donate millions to children's hospitals. I contain multitudes, as the poet said. Julia studied him in the lamplight. He was handsome, she had to admit, the kind of dark, dangerous handsome that women wrote romance novels about. But there was something else there, too, something she hadn't expected. Intelligence, certainly. Control, absolutely. But also a kind of loneliness, a sense that despite all his power and influence, he was fundamentally alone in the world. If I agree, she said slowly, and that's a very big if, what would this marriage actually look like? You'd live here? Or in the Palermo apartment if you prefer. You'd continue your charity work, your friendships, your life, just as my wife rather than as yourself alone. You'd accompany me to social events, represent the family at important functions, be the face of legitimacy to the world. In private, we'd negotiate our relationship as we went along. And children? If you want them, eventually, yes. If you don't, we'll discuss alternatives. Adoption, perhaps, or accepting that we won't have children. I'm not going to force you to bear my heirs like some medieval lord, but I won't lie. I would like children someday, raised with love rather than fear. The vulnerability in that last statement caught her off guard. Here was the most feared man in Sicily, admitting he wanted children raised with love. The contradiction was dizzying. I need time, Julia said. I need to think about all of this without you sitting here watching me. Dante stood immediately. Of course. Take all the time you need tonight. We'll talk more in the morning. He paused at the door. Julia, for what it's worth, I'm sorry your father put you in this position, and I'm sorry that fool hurt you today. You deserved better. After he left, Julia stood on the balcony for a long time, watching the moon's reflection on the water. She thought about Marco, about the life she'd imagined with him that had been built on lies and cowardice. She thought about her father, who had sold her future to save his pride. She thought about her mother, who must have known and said nothing. She thought about the crowd at the villa, watching her humiliation with greedy eyes. And she thought about Dante Valentino, who had walked into her disaster and claimed her for his own, who had given her an escape from her shame while binding her to him with chains made of debt and obligation. She should hate him. She wanted to hate him. But what she actually felt was more complicated. A confusing mix of resentment, curiosity, and a strange sense of safety she didn't want to acknowledge. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of night-blooming jasmine and salt water. In the distance, Julia could see lights from fishing boats, heading out for the night's work. Life continued, indifferent to her crisis, to her confusion, to the impossible choice she faced. She went inside and found her phone in the suitcase, turning it on despite knowing what she'd find. 67 missed calls, over 100 text messages, social media notifications numbering in the hundreds. Her wedding disaster had gone viral, videos and photos spreading across Sicily and beyond. She was now infamous, the jilted bride humiliated at the altar, then swept away by the notorious Dante Valentino. One text message caught her eye, from an unknown number. "I'm so sorry, Julia. I never meant for it to happen. Marco pursued me, and I was weak. Please forgive me. Francesca." Julia deleted it without responding. Forgiveness was the last thing on her mind. She found her mother's number and called, knowing she needed to hear the truth from her parents' own mouths. "Julia! Oh, thank God, we've been so worried." "Did you know?" Julia interrupted. "About Papa's deal with Dante Valentino. Did you know?" Silence. Then quietly, "Yes, I knew." "How long?" "From the beginning. Your father told me everything when he made the arrangement. And you said nothing. You let me get engaged to Marco. Let me plan a wedding. Let me believe I was building a life with him. We thought we had more time." Her mother's voice broke. "We thought we could find a way out, or that maybe Valentino would forget about the deal, or that something would change. We never imagined that I'd be humiliated in front of everyone I know. That's the part you didn't imagine? Julia, please try to understand. I understand perfectly. You and Papa chose your comfort, your status, your money over my right to know the truth about my own life. You're cowards, both of you." She was shaking now, anger finally breaking through the numbness. "I'm staying at the Valentino estate tonight. Tomorrow I'll decide what to do. But know this, whatever I choose, it won't be for you or Papa. It will be for me, and for Elena, because unlike you, I actually care about protecting her future." She ended the call before her mother could respond, then turned off the phone completely. No more messages tonight, no more explanations or excuses or apologies that meant nothing. She climbed into the massive bed, the sheets cool and smelling faintly of lavender. Despite everything, despite the chaos of her thoughts, exhaustion won. Within minutes, Julia was asleep, her wedding day finally over. She woke to sunlight streaming through the French doors and the smell of fresh coffee. For a moment, she forgot where she was, forgot everything that had happened. Then memory crashed back like a wave, and she sat up, heart pounding. A soft knock at the door. "Signora, I've brought breakfast." Maria's voice, gentle and reassuring. "Come in." Maria entered with a tray, espresso, fresh pastries, fruit, and a single white rose in a small vase. She set it on the bedside table and opened the curtains wider, letting in the full glory of the morning light. "Signor Valentino asked me to tell you he'll be in his study when you're ready to talk. No rush. He's cleared his morning schedule for you." "That's very accommodating of him," Julia said, unable to keep the sarcasm from her voice. Maria smiled slightly. "He can be, when he wants to be. I've known Dante since he was a boy, Signora. He's not the monster people say he is. Complicated, yes. Dangerous to his enemies, absolutely. But not cruel, not to those under his protection. And that's what I am now? Under his protection? Whether you marry him or not, yes. He claimed you publicly yesterday. That means something in our world. It means you're safe from anyone who might wish you harm or humiliation. It's not nothing, Signora." After Maria left, Julia ate slowly, thinking about those words. Protection. Safety. In the world she'd inhabited until yesterday, the world of respectable families and social obligations, she'd never needed protection. But that world had turned on her in an instant. had watched her fall with hungry eyes, had documented her shame for entertainment. She showered and dressed in simple clothes from her suitcase, jeans and a white blouse, casual and far removed from yesterday's elaborate gown. In the mirror, she looked like herself again. Not a bride, not a spectacle. Just Julia. The Valentino estate was even more impressive in daylight. Marble floors, high ceilings with frescoes that must have cost a fortune to restore, antique furniture that belonged in museums. But there were also signs of life. Fresh flowers in vases, books scattered on tables, a child's drawing stuck to a refrigerator door that she glimpsed as she passed the kitchen. "Whose child?" she asked Maria, who was guiding her to Dante's study. "Dante's nephew, little Marco? His sister Rosa's boy. She lives in Rome now, but they visit often. Dante adores him." Another contradiction. The ruthless Mafia boss with a nephew's drawing on his fridge. The study was a masculine space. Dark wood, leather chairs, shelves filled with books in Italian, English, and what looked like Latin. Dante stood by the window, phone to his ear, speaking rapidly in dialect. When he saw her, he ended the call immediately. "Julia, thank you for coming down. Please sit." She chose one of the leather chairs, accepting the espresso he offered. He settled behind his desk, and for a moment they simply looked at each other, both aware that whatever happened in the next hour would determine the course of their futures. "Did you sleep?" he asked. "Eventually. You?" "Not much. I was thinking about what to say to you, how to convince you that this arrangement could work." He paused. "But I realized that convincing you might be the wrong approach. Instead, I want to give you information and let you make an informed choice." "I'm listening." "Your father's debt to me, including the deferred interest, amounts to 3.7 million euros. He cannot pay this. His company generates barely enough to keep your family comfortable. There's nothing left over for debt repayment. If I call in the debt, everything collapses." Julia felt sick. 3.7 million, an impossible sum. "However," Dante continued, "if you agree to marry me, the debt is forgiven entirely. Moreover, I'll continue to support your family's business, ensure your sister receives the education and opportunities she deserves, and your parents can maintain their lifestyle without fear of financial ruin. And what do you get out of this, besides me? Legitimacy, respectability. Your family is old Sicilian nobility, respected despite your father's recent troubles. Marrying you connects me to that history, that legitimacy. It makes me more than just the Valentino family enforcer. It makes me part of the establishment. So I'm a trophy, a symbol." "You're a partner," he corrected. "Someone intelligent enough to navigate the social world I need to access, compassionate enough to soften my rougher edges in public, strong enough to stand beside me without being crushed by the weight of my reputation. You don't even know me. I know more than you think. I know you spent every Saturday for 2 years reading to terminally ill children at the hospital. I know you organized a fundraiser that paid for 3 new ambulances for rural communities. I know you stood up to your father when he wanted to cut workers' pay during a slow season, and you convinced him to find another solution. I know you're kind to service staff, generous to those with less, and fiercely protective of your younger sister. Should I continue?" Julia felt exposed, vulnerable. "You've been watching me. Investigating you? Yes. I needed to know if you were who I thought you were. And you are, Julia. You're exactly the kind of person I hoped to find. Someone with integrity, compassion, and strength. Stop trying to flatter me. I'm not flattering you. I'm telling you why I think we could build something real together, given time." He stood and came around the desk, but kept his distance, respecting her space. "I know you don't love me. I don't expect you to. But I hope that over time you might come to respect me, trust me, perhaps even care for me. And I promise you this, I will respect you, protect you, and never humiliate you the way Marco did. That's a low bar. Perhaps, but it's an honest one." Julia stood and walked to the window, looking out over the grounds. She could see gardens, a pool, tennis courts, and beyond them, the endless blue of the Mediterranean. A beautiful prison, if she chose to see it that way. Or a sanctuary, if she chose differently. "If I say yes," she said slowly, "I need conditions. Name them. I continue my charity work, and you don't interfere or try to control who I associate with. I want my own money, separate from yours. An allowance or salary or whatever you want to call it, but money that's mine to spend as I choose. I want the right to refuse public events if I feel uncomfortable or unsafe. And most importantly," she turned to face him, What happens between us physically is my choice. Always. You don't touch me unless I want you to. Agreed to all of it. He didn't even hesitate. Anything else? I want to meet your family, your sister, your nephew, anyone else who's part of your life. If I'm going to marry into the Valentino family, I need to know what that actually means. Rosa is coming for dinner tonight. You'll like her. She's the only person who's not afraid to tell me when I'm being an idiot. Despite everything, Julia almost smiled at that. And I want honesty between us, she continued. I know you can't tell me everything about your business, but I don't want lies. If you can't tell me something, say so. Don't make up stories or keep me in the dark about things that affect my life. You have my word. The word of a mafia boss, Julia said. What's that worth? Everything. His voice was absolutely serious. In my world, my word is my bond. If I break it, I have nothing. So when I give you my word, Julia, I mean it with everything I am. She believed him. God help her, she actually believed him. I need one more thing, she said. I want to talk to my sister. Explain this to her myself before she hears rumors or lies. And I want to make sure she understands that she has choices in her life, that she won't be sold off like I was. I'll have my driver take you to see her today if you'd like. And I give you my word. Your sister's future is her own. No deals, no arrangements, no debts that need to be paid with her freedom. Julia took a deep breath. She was standing at a crossroads, and both paths led to places she'd never imagined going. She could refuse, try to find some other way to save her family, accept the collapse of everything she'd known. Or she could accept this strange arrangement with a man she barely knew, this marriage that was both business transaction and something potentially more. If I do this, she said, if I agree to marry you, when? Soon. Within the month, if you're willing. The longer we wait, the more speculation and gossip will grow. Better to make it official, show the world that this is real, that you chose me rather than being forced. But I am being forced. You're being offered an unpleasant choice between bad options. That's different from force. You can say no, Julia. I'll be disappointed. Your family will suffer, but you won't be physically compelled. The choice is genuinely yours. Was it, though? With 3.7 million euros hanging over her head, with her sister's future at stake, with her family's ruin looming? What kind of choice was that? But then she thought about yesterday, about standing at that altar while Marco rejected her, while 300 people watched her shame. She thought about the life she'd imagined with Marco, ordinary, respectable, safe, and how it had been built on lies from the beginning. Her father's lies, Marco's lies, her own willful blindness to the cracks in her perfect picture. Maybe there was something freeing in having all those illusions stripped away. Maybe starting from this place of brutal honesty was better than building on foundations of deception. All right, she said, the word escaping before she could second-guess herself. I'll marry you. But know this, Dante Valentino. If you betray me, if you hurt me, if you make me regret this choice, I will find a way to make you pay for it. I don't know how yet, but I will. He smiled, genuinely smiled, and it transformed his face from dangerous to almost handsome. I'd expect nothing less. You wouldn't be the woman I want if you accepted this meekly. I'm not accepting it meekly. I'm accepting it strategically, pragmatically, and with serious reservations. As long as you're accepting it. He pulled a small box from his desk drawer and opened it, revealing a ring that took her breath away. An emerald, deep green as the Sicilian hills in spring, surrounded by diamonds set in platinum. It was unique, clearly antique, and absolutely stunning. This was my grandmother's, Dante said. She wore it for 53 years, and when she died, she told my grandfather to save it for the woman I truly chose, not just married for convenience. I think she'd approve of you. You're very presumptuous, keeping that in your desk drawer. I'm an optimist. He held out the ring. May I? Julia extended her hand, and he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. The emerald caught the light, throwing green fire across the room. It's beautiful, she admitted. You're beautiful, he replied, then caught himself. Sorry, I said I wouldn't try to flatter you. That wasn't flattery, that was a simple observation. She looked up at him. This man who was now her fiancé, her future husband, her fate. When do we tell people? Today. I'll make calls, arrange for a proper announcement. We'll say we've been secretly seeing each other for months, that yesterday at the villa was dramatic, but ultimately brought us together publicly. People will gossip, but they'll accept it. They've seen stranger things in Sicily. And my family? You tell them whatever you want, I won't interfere with that relationship, though I suspect your father will be relieved and your mother will be confused. Elena will be horrified. Then you'll have to convince her otherwise. Show her that this arrangement, unusual as it is, might actually work out for everyone involved. They spent the rest of the morning working out details. The wedding would be small, private, just immediate family, and a few witnesses. No repeat of yesterday's spectacle. They'd marry in the chapel on the Valentino estate, with a priest Dante knew who wouldn't ask uncomfortable questions. Afterward, a simple dinner, nothing elaborate. I don't want a honeymoon, Julia said firmly. That feels too intimate for where we actually are in this relationship. Fair enough. We'll spend the first week here, giving you time to adjust, then move into the Palermo apartment if you prefer city life. I'd like that. I want to stay close to my work, my friends, my life. Of course. As the day progressed, Julia found herself surprised by Dante's consideration, his willingness to accommodate her needs. He wasn't the monster she'd expected, or rather, he was a monster in business, but apparently capable of something approaching normalcy in personal relationships. That evening, Rosa arrived with her son Marco, a 4-year-old whirlwind of energy. She was beautiful in an understated way, with the same dark eyes as her brother, but a softer face, more open and expressive. So you're the one who's captured my impossible brother's attention, Rosa said, embracing Julia warmly. I'm so glad. He's been alone too long, too focused on the business, too wrapped up in being the feared Dante Valentino. Maybe you'll remind him that he's also just Dante, a man who deserves happiness. Little Marco tugged at Julia's hand. Are you going to be my aunt? I suppose I am, Julia said, surprising herself with how easily the words came. Good. Uncle Dante needs someone to make him smile more. He's always so serious. From the mouths of babes, Julia thought, dinner was surprisingly pleasant. Rosa told stories about their childhood, about Dante getting into trouble for defending younger kids from bullies, about him staying up all night studying to prove he was more than just muscle for the family business. A picture emerged of a complicated man, violent when necessary, protective always, surprisingly intellectual, and deeply loyal to those he considered his own. He'll be a good husband, Rosa said quietly, when Dante had taken Marco to see the koi pond. I know how this started, and I know it's not ideal, but give him a chance, Julia. He's been half in love with the idea of you for years. The reality might surprise you both. After Rosa left, Dante and Julia stood on the terrace, looking out at the stars. The night was clear, warm, perfect. Your sister is lovely, Julia said. She's my conscience, Dante replied. Whenever I'm about to do something particularly ruthless, I think about what Rosa would say. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, I choose a different path. That's surprisingly sweet. I contain multitudes, remember? They stood in comfortable silence for a while, and Julia realized something surprising. She wasn't unhappy, confused, uncertain, anxious about the future, yes, but not unhappy. There was something oddly freeing about having her life's course determined, about not having to make endless choices about an uncertain future. Can I ask you something? Dante said. Of course. Did you love him, Marco? Julia considered the question honestly. I thought I did. But looking back, I think I loved the idea of him, the life he represented. Safety, normalcy, respectability. I don't think I ever knew him well enough to truly love him. And now? Now I know that safety and normalcy are illusions. Life is chaos barely contained, and we're all just pretending we have control. She turned to look at him. At least with you, there's honesty about what this is. A transaction, yes, but an honest one. That's more than I had with Marco. I want it to become more than a transaction, Dante said softly. I want us to build something real, Julia. I don't expect it to happen overnight, but I hope, over time, we might find something genuine together. We'll see, she said, non-committal but not dismissive. The weeks before the wedding passed in a blur. Julia visited her family, enduring her father's relieved tears and her mother's anxious attempts to understand what had happened. Elena was predictably horrified, calling Dante a monster and begging Julia not to go through with it. I don't have a choice, Lena, Julia explained. Or rather, my choice is between this and destroying our family. What would you have me do? Run away with me. We'll go to Rome, Milan, anywhere. We'll start over. And live how? With what money? You're 17, still in school. I'm 24 with no marketable skills except being good with children and organizing charity events. We'd be broke within a month. At least we'd be free. Would we? Freedom without security is just a different kind of prison. Julia hugged her sister tight. I'm doing this for you too, Lena, so you can finish school, go to university, have real choices about your future. Don't make it harder than it already is. The wedding day arrived with perfect weather, sunny but not too hot, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of the sea. Julia wore a simple cream dress, elegant but understated, with her hair loose around her shoulders. No veil this time, no elaborate ceremony, no crowd of vultures hoping for entertainment. Just her immediate family, Rosa and little Marco, Dante's closest associates, and the priest in the small chapel on the estate. The ceremony took 15 minutes, and when Dante kissed her at the end, it was brief, respectful, almost chaste. She was married. Again. Or rather, for real this time. The dinner afterward was quiet, conversation flowing easily, wine loosening tongues. Even Julia's father seemed relaxed for the first time in years. The weight of his debts finally lifted. Her mother kept looking at Julia with mixed expressions: relief, guilt, concern, hope. When the evening ended and the guests departed, Julia found herself alone with her husband in the master suite. Dante had insisted she take the room, saying he'd sleep in the guest room until she felt comfortable with different arrangements. Thank you, she said as he prepared to leave, for respecting my boundaries. I meant what I said about honesty and respect, he replied. Good night, Julia. Call if you need anything. After he left, Julia stood on the balcony of what was now her room, her home, her new life. She looked at the emerald ring on her finger, at the dark sea beyond, at the stars overhead that had witnessed centuries of human drama and would witness centuries more. She thought about the woman she'd been 2 weeks ago, naive, hopeful, believing in fairy tales. That woman was gone, destroyed at an altar in front of 300 witnesses. In her place was someone harder, wiser, more pragmatic, but maybe that wasn't entirely a bad thing. Over the following weeks, Julia settled into her new life. She resumed her charity work and found that being Signora Valentino opened doors that had previously been closed. People wanted to meet her, wanted to be associated with her, wanted to please the wife of Dante Valentino. She used this influence ruthlessly, raising more money in a month than she'd raised in the previous year. Dante kept his promises. He gave her freedom, space, respect. He included her in decisions about the household but never pressured her about his business dealings. They developed routines: breakfast together when he was home, dinner several times a week, occasional walks on the beach in the evenings. And slowly, surprisingly, they became friends. She learned that he read philosophy in Latin for relaxation, that he had a weakness for old American jazz, that he anonymously funded scholarships for gifted children from poor families. He learned that she could be wickedly funny when comfortable, that she had strong opinions about art and literature, that she sang unconsciously when she thought no one was listening. 2 months into their marriage, Julia woke to find Dante already awake beside her. They'd started sharing the bed a few weeks earlier, both agreeing that the separate rooms arrangement felt unnecessarily distant, given how comfortable they'd become with each other. So far, sharing the bed had meant exactly that: sleeping in the same space, nothing more. Morning, she murmured sleepily. Good morning, wife. He said it with gentle humor, acknowledging both the formality and the growing warmth between them. What time is it? Early. I couldn't sleep. He was propped against the headboard, reading something on his tablet. Business problems? Always, but nothing that can't wait. He set the tablet aside and looked at her. Julia, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you regret it? Marrying me? She considered the question honestly, as she always tried to do with him. Some days, yes. I regret the circumstances, the lack of choice, the way it all happened. But the marriage itself? No, not really. You've been better than I expected. That's a ringing endorsement, he said dryly. I mean it as a compliment. You could have been awful, controlling, cruel. Instead, you've been patient, respectful, even kind. That means something. High praise indeed, not awful. She laughed and surprised them both by reaching out to touch his face, tracing the scar on his cheek. Where did you really get this? I told you, knife fight when I was younger. I know. But what's the real story? He was quiet for a moment, then took her hand, holding it against his face. I was 19. Someone tried to kill my father, and I got in the way. The knife was meant for his throat, but I moved faster. Nearly died. Spent 2 weeks in the hospital. But my father lived another 15 years. I'd do it again. That's when you learned about sacrifice, Julia said softly. That's when I learned that protecting the people you love is the only thing that truly matters. His dark eyes met hers. I would protect you the same way, Julia. I need you to know that. Something shifted in that moment. Something fundamental. Maybe it was the early morning intimacy, or his unexpected vulnerability, or simply the accumulated weeks of genuine connection. Whatever it was, Julia found herself leaning forward and kissing him, really kissing him for the first time since their brief wedding kiss. He responded immediately but carefully, letting her control the pace, the depth, the duration. When she pulled back, they were both breathing harder. I didn't expect that, he said. Neither did I. She felt strangely calm, certain. I think I'm ready for this to be more than just a business arrangement. If you still want that. If I want, Julia, I've wanted that since the moment I first saw you 4 years ago. Then show me, she whispered. What followed was tender, unhurried, and surprisingly perfect. Dante was patient and attentive, making sure she felt safe and cherished. Afterward, wrapped in his arms, Julia realized something astonishing. She was happy. Genuinely, surprisingly, undeniably happy. What are you thinking? Dante asked, his fingers tracing patterns on her shoulder. I'm thinking that life is very strange. 2 months ago, I was being humiliated at a wedding to a man I thought I loved. Now I'm in bed with a man I was afraid of, and I feel more content than I've felt in years. Strange indeed. He kissed her forehead. But I'll take it. The months that followed brought deeper connection and understanding. They had fights. About his business practices, about her desire to do more dangerous charity work in rough neighborhoods, about his overprotectiveness and her stubbornness. But they always talked through it, always found compromise, always came back to each other stronger. Rosa became Julia's closest friend, and little Marco spent weekends at the estate, filling the house with laughter. Elena gradually came around, especially after Dante quietly arranged for her to attend her dream university with a full scholarship that he pretended came from an anonymous donor. Julia's parents remained grateful but distant, both of them aware that their relationship with their daughter had been fundamentally damaged by their deception. Julia worked on forgiveness, but it came slowly, in small increments. One evening, nearly 6 months into their marriage, Dante came home looking troubled. Julia had learned to read his moods, to know when he needed space versus when he needed to talk. What happened? She asked, pouring him a whiskey. Marco Santini is in trouble, gambling debts he can't pay. The people he owes are not forgiving, and they're threatening him. Julia felt a complicated mix of emotions. Residual anger at Marco for his betrayal, but also concern because despite everything, she didn't wish him harm. What will they do to him? Nothing pleasant. He has 2 weeks to come up with 50,000 euros or face serious consequences. And you're telling me this because I want to know what you want me to do. I can pay his debts, make this problem go away, or I can let nature take its course. Your choice. Julia sat down, thinking. Marco had humiliated her, betrayed her, hurt her in front of everyone she knew. She could have revenge now, could let him suffer the consequences of his actions. But was that who she wanted to be? Pay it, she said finally. Pay his debts. Are you sure? No, but I think it's the right thing to do. Not for him. He doesn't deserve my mercy. But for me. I don't want to be the kind of person who lets someone suffer when I have the power to help, even someone who hurt me. Dante smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his face. This is why I fell in love with you. Your capacity for compassion even when it's difficult. The words hung in the air between them. Love. He'd said it casually, but they both knew the weight of that word. You love me? Julia asked softly. I've loved you for longer than you've known me, he replied simply. I fell in love with the woman reading to dying children, and I've fallen deeper in love with the woman who chose to make the best of an impossible situation, who's made this house a home, who's given me a reason to be better than I was. Tears pricked at Julia's eyes. I think I love you too, she admitted. I didn't expect to, didn't want to at first, but I do. You've become my best friend, my partner, my home. He pulled her into his arms, and they stayed like that for a long time, holding each other as the sun set over the Mediterranean, painting the sky in those same shades of amber and rose that had colored the evening of her disastrous almost wedding. That night had been the end of her old life, but it had also been the beginning of something unexpected, something real, something built on honesty rather than illusions. Final reflection. What do we learn from Julia's story? Perhaps that the worst moments of our lives can become doorways to unexpected happiness. That being forced into a situation doesn't mean we can't choose how we respond to it. That sometimes the monsters we fear turn out to be complicated human beings capable of love and change. Julia lost the fairy tale she thought she wanted, the respectable marriage, the normal life, the safe future. But in its place, she found something more valuable. Genuine partnership based on mutual respect, growing love built on honesty, and the strength that comes from facing hard truths rather than living comfortable lies. Her story reminds us that we are not defined by what happens to us, but by how we respond. That dignity isn't about avoiding humiliation. It's about how we carry ourselves when humiliation comes. That sometimes the best revenge is not revenge at all, but building a good life with unexpected people in unexpected ways. And perhaps most importantly, it teaches us that love doesn't always arrive in the package we expect. Sometimes it comes wearing a dangerous face, speaking uncomfortable truths, offering flawed but honest choices. Sometimes it asks us to be braver than we thought possible, stronger than we believed we could be. Julia walked into that chapel expecting a fairy tale and got a nightmare instead. But from that nightmare, she built something real. A marriage based on truth rather than illusion, love earned rather than assumed, happiness chosen rather than expected. That's not a fairy tale. That's better. If you enjoyed this story of unexpected redemption and complicated love, I invite you to subscribe to our channel for more realistic, emotionally powerful narratives that explore the messy, beautiful complexity of human relationships. Hit that subscribe button and join us as we continue exploring stories that remind us that life rarely goes according to plan, but sometimes the unexpected paths lead to the most meaningful destinations.